This is Light of Life, and we are led by the Lord to give our testimonies. So we pray that everything we say and the information we give, it touches all of your hearts where it needs to be. I'm going to start because this is an interesting testimony. Both of our testimonies are intertwined. They're weaved or weaved. Weaved.
No.
They're webbed.
They were woven.
They were woven. Our testimonies are woven together. This is my child. And somewhere along the line, I got off the track and started to dabble into every false religion that was out there. I felt deep in my heart that there was something supernatural out there. I felt deep in my heart that there was something great, like that we were all born with a purpose and we all were born with specific gifts. I was into Santeria, which is Catholicism and Afro-Cuban witchcraft. I was a child of Sai Baba. Sai Baba was this Indian guru, to the point that I would give my daughter ashes, which was called vibhuti, to swallow because supposedly it had healing properties. And I did tattoos to mark myself that I was doing all these things. And I was also into New Age, I became addicted, reaching out to people that I don't know and wiring them money so that I can buy daily someone to throw cards and do witchcraft magic for me. All this did was bring me down this large and deep rabbit hole. So I got into Buddhism, which Buddhism is not a religion but as a lifestyle. I got into Hinduism, and that's the kind of mother that my daughter grew up with.
Yeah, and as a child, as a very young child, I actually had a lot of supernatural experiences and dreams and visions, angels and things of that sort. And it's interesting how as I grew into a young adult, how all those things I seemed to forget them. And all I saw as a young adult in high school, because that's when it was most prominent and what I remember the best. Everything just seemed so wacky and out of order, and that it turned me off to any spirituality. Relationships can be incredibly influential. I was in a relationship with someone who was an atheist. At the end of that relationship, I concluded that God was absolutely something that people needed in order to satiate the fear of the unknown when it came to death. That people only felt comfortable with dying if they knew that there was a God and that He was good and that He wanted for you to join Him in heaven, which was this glorious place. But the thought that once you die and the lights just go out and that's just the end of the story, that was a terrifying idea for people, and that's not what people wanted to hear or believe, and therefore they rejected that idea and instead created an omnipotent being that would save them from that reality. And that completely made sense to me. And in terms of Jesus, I believe that Jesus was an alien being that descended on earth some 2,000 years ago, and that because of the primitive mindset, I thought they were just very impressed with his supernatural abilities, and that they just ended up worshiping him. That relationship eventually ended. Then I ended up getting engaged. He had been baptized as a Christian when he was younger, before he met me, but he wasn't living as a Christian. And certain things happen, we end up separating, and that separation was a little bit hard for me because I ended up completely by myself. Fast forward,
I leave him, and my mom and my brother also end up moving out. I'm completely by myself in this apartment.
I was feeling so bad, in a lot of silence, that it forced me to seek out some peace. I wanted mental peace, I wanted emotional peace. I just wanted to be okay to then move into the next phase of my life, which to me became a little bit daunting because I had already envisioned myself coming into a marriage. At this time, I was a college student, and while I was going to class, I was walking from one building to another. There was this guy. He was watching me. Right when I was passing him, he grabs my arm. So like this, he like grabs with this arm as I'm walking this way. As I'm passing him, he stops me. He pulls me like this, and I look at him like kind of like what gives, and he says to me, God says, and then da 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 da. And so you can imagine, the majority of the things that he said were incredibly personal. As a matter of fact, he even said things to me that I had only thought, things that I hadn't shared with anyone. He even shared with me information that I didn't even have an opportunity to even communicate or share with other individuals. He didn't know anyone that I knew because, believe me, after this encounter, I went ahead and I did some digging. So when he's done, I go ahead and I said to him, because I didn't know what else to say, I said, I just figured I want to pick his mind. I said, who are you? And where can I find you so that we can sit down and talk some more? He tells me his name, and he tells me, Wednesday at blah 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 time, meet me at room blah blah blah. Okay. I didn't have to write anything down. I was so impacted by the experience that literally he said Wednesday and it was Thursday. I pretty much had to wait a whole week, and I did not forget the date, I didn't forget the time, and I didn't forget the room number without even jotting it down. Come that day, Wednesday, I show up right on time to the room, and there he is with a whole other mess of people, and it's a meeting. Turns out it was a club meeting for the most popular Christian club on campus, and I was like, oh, super disappointed. I'm thinking that I'm gonna be by myself with this guy so that I can kind of do some,
brain picking,
interrogation type stuff. And here we are. So what else? So I'm there and I'm like, well, I'm already here. Maybe everybody here is like him. Maybe this is some type of weird cult where they have like, brain reading abilities or something like that. So I said, okay, I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna watch and see what's up. The first thing that they do is that they have like this time of like worship where this kid with a guitar and this other kid who sings stands in front of this projector with lyrics, and they just like they just go in and they started to worship. And I just remember, I don't remember, after that they had like some time in the Bible and they did some other things, but all of that is a blur to me. I specifically just remember that the worship was off the chain. I had never heard worship music before, and it was like my first time, and I remember the song. It was I Surrender, and I kept going every Wednesday. Being an atheist, I'm still an atheist. I still believe that Jesus is an alien, but I keep going because of the music. All of these people, they're trying to minister to me. They're trying to tell me about Jesus and all this stuff. I spent a lot of time focusing on the mind and the body, but I've spent no time thinking about the spirit, because I didn't find that it had any value, because it just seemed like a hot mess to me by what I saw in her. It was just so messy and confusing. We see happy and nice people every day, and people that seem to be at peace with themselves and the world, but the level of peace, the level of kindness, and the level of joy that I saw in them was different. It had a different feeling. There was a different feeling that I was attached to it, and it was very attractive, and it almost felt as though when I was with them, I almost felt a little bit of that joy, a little bit of that peace, and in myself, and I enjoyed that as well. Aside from enjoying the music, I enjoyed also the way that I felt when I was around them. So that also kept me coming, and also opened me up to listen to them and invite them into, making conversations with me about their faith. And so I continued to go, and I was actually a very, very heavy pot smoker. So a lot of times I would even go to these meetings high as a kite, and I didn't care, and I didn't think there was a problem with it. And no one ever told me anything. They accepted me for where I was at that stage of my life, not knowing if I was ever going to give myself to Christ. And actually, a lot of people didn't believe that I was going to give myself to Christ. And the ones that were there to minister to me and whatever, which, to tell you the truth, at the end of the day, it turned out to just be one person who had the patience to continue to deal with me. Even that one person was discouraged by many to just leave me because I was never going to get there. They just felt that I was too resistant. But it's not that I was resistant. It's just that from my perspective, if I was going to deliver myself into any faith, why should I carelessly just deliver myself into something that is going to be so life-altering? Like, I needed to know why for everything. I needed to know how. I needed to know everything. And I even had a notebook where I wrote down questions, and then I would go and seek out answers to those questions. My concern was not to ruin anyone's life by dismantling someone else's belief system, but I wanted to make sure that I was on the path of truth. That's what I did. And I figured if God exists, He can handle my stupid questions. So here we go. And I didn't shy away from any question. Now, what ends up happening? Of course, I'm not going to lie to you. This whole process, 3 to 6 months of dedicated seeking. And in that, I did have a hiccup where I just got really overwhelmed with all the information that I was getting. And, I wasn't keeping my plate clean at all. I was going to Buddhist temples. I was visiting different denominations of Christianity. I was even visiting churches that aren't Christian denominations. I began to read the Quran, lots of stuff. Because I was exposing myself to so many different things, I ended up getting frustrated. As I went deeper, then I started seeing, but wait a minute, there's a lot of contradicting thoughts that are happening here. So especially I found them most densely in New Age, which was one of my mom's favorites. And I was like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. You cannot believe in this while believing in that, because this contradicts that. Just to give you one example, you cannot say that you believe in God and you also believe in Buddhism. That doesn't make sense.
In Buddhism, they don't believe in God.
They believe in science. They believe that science has very effectively explained the beginning. They don't feel that there is a need to add God to that, because that is sufficient. Every Buddhist is in their own way an atheist, because Buddhism is a way of life. It's not a religion. And so that's just to give you one example. And that was one that I brought to her attention once I started to get really deep into this thing. Likely also something that I noticed is that she didn't believe in hell, but she believed in demons. That doesn't make any sense. There's no hell, yet I believe that poltergeist activity in your house is demonic. Come on, dude. Make up your mind. Contradicting thoughts. So, that, when I started running into all the contradictions, that's when frustration started to hit. And I ended up just calling quits on my entire journey for 3 whole days. And the reason why I couldn't stay away was because those 3 days felt so cold. And it's interesting because I had not yet made a decision, a spiritual decision. I hadn't subscribed to any particular faith. I was still simply seeking. And in the seek, I already felt life. I already felt warmth. I already felt joy. And I was already beginning to feel peace. And by disconnecting myself from the seek, from the journey, I felt colder than I ever did in my entire life. And I didn't understand why. Because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Before I went on this journey, I was okay. And I didn't feel miserable like this. I'm not telling you that I was a happy person before. But the level of misery that I felt when I stopped seeking was deeper than the misery that I felt on a day-to-day basis before I went into the seek. And the problem was that I was already tasting what it was like to abide in a heavenly space. And by disconnecting myself from that, of course things are going to feel worse than they did before I started the seek. Because before I started the seek, I didn't know what gold was. I was living in a bronze world. You go ahead and you dip into now this world made of gold, and then you're taken away from that, or you remove yourself from that world of gold and you go back to the world of bronze. Everything looks like what it is, very dull and brown. And so I didn't know that things were dull and brown because I didn't know that things could be gold. So anyways, it didn't last, and I said, okay, wait a minute, there's something to this. I can't be like this. I had the worst attitude. I was snapping on people left and right. I was just absolutely miserable. And then I said, I cannot be in this misery a day longer. So I said, I need to finish this journey. So I finished. So fast forward.
Because I'm not going to give you every last detail of every day of the 6 months, of the almost 6 months. But what ends up happening is that
one fateful day, I get a phone call from a friend, and he tells me that he wanted me to talk. This guy is a Christian, by the way. He tells me that he wanted me to talk to a friend of his who is this older gentleman. And so I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So I go and I talk to the guy. So the guy is, preaching the gospel to me, and then he goes and he says to me, like, why haven't you given your life to Christ yet? Like, essentially that I'm taking too long to decide. And I didn't appreciate that, because immediately I thought, he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand my process. He doesn't understand that I'm not just going to jump into things blindly. If I do end up subscribing to this thing, I'm going to do it 150%. I'm not going to do like this whole ice skid. I'm not doing it. So he's talking all this, and I'm like, being polite because he's an older guy. But then all of a sudden, he goes and he says to me, what if you don't wake up tomorrow? Do you know where you're going to go? For some reason, I never heard that before in my life. And then I said, oh crap. If hell is for real and I die, and it turns out that all this is as it's supposed to be, as they say that it is, and that I need to make a decision, for Christ. If not, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it into the front door of heaven, and I end up in hell. That's going to be devastating, because that's for eternity. It's not just like, oh, well, it's going to suck for like a year. No, it's like, it's going to suck forever. And if it's a real thing, it hit me at that moment. I said, oh my gosh, I need to make a decision. So that actually, like, he kind of like, it did stir something up in me that I was really stressed. He goes and he says to me, do you know John 3:16? I was not reading the Bible, but I knew John 3:16.
You did?
Because I was around nothing but Christians for like a good 6 months or so.
Oh yeah.
And that's like the most popular verse in the Bible. So I had actually passively memorized it. And so he tells me, so if you know it, recite it back to me. And like a boss, I did. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And then he said, very good. And he says, now, who is whosoever? And then I said, whosoever. Anybody, everybody, all people. And he says, exactly. And he said, is whosoever, all people, anybody, everybody, does that include you? And then I said, yes, I'm part of everybody. And then he said, okay, great. Now, replace the word whosoever and insert your name in there. And now repeat it. I said, all right. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that if Frances believes in him, she will not perish, but have everlasting life.
That's powerful.
And the wind blows as I say it. That is insane. When I heard that verse with my name in it, it became so personal, so intense. It changed everything for me. That when the guy was like, so are you ready? And look, and with all of that, he says, so are you ready to give your life to Christ tonight? I said no. I still said no, because I needed to chew on it. But what I did get from that conversation is a sense of urgency, that I was running around in circles. I already had all the answers to all of my questions, except for one. Is Jesus indeed who all these people say that he is? Is he the Son of God?
Or is he an alien?
Or is he an alien? And I was right the whole time. Because that's a big hockey puck of a cookie to swallow. That this guy is also God. What the heck is that about? That doesn't even sound right. Alright. So that's why I told him, no, I'm not ready. And then he says, call me when you are, but don't waste any more time. I did not sleep well that night. When I hung up with this guy, at this stage of my seeking, God had already revealed himself to me as existing. And so I was no longer an atheist. I graduated. And so I felt comfortable when I went to bed that night, which was soon after I hung up with him. I knelt before my bed and I said, God, please don't let me die in my sleep. You know that I'm just trying to get the answer to this one last question. If you would just answer this one question, we can just get, be done with this already. Don't let me die in the middle of the night without me getting this question answered. And then let me go to hell, because that would be a waste of a life. And so I went to bed very stressed, despite my prayer, hoping that I would wake up the next day. And of course I did. And when I saw that I did, I was very relieved. And I said, I'm not wasting another day, because I'm not going to spend another bad night. So I went and I locked myself in an empty bedroom. And then I said, okay. I went in with a notebook, a pen. I don't think I took my phone in there. And I took a Bible. And it was an empty room. And then I said, okay, I have my notebook so that if I have a supernatural experience, I can document it right away. And I have my Bible. For what reason? I don't know, because I wasn't reading the Bible. But it just made sense to go in there with my Bible. So I had it all laid out, and I literally stood there in the middle of the room, and I said, okay, God, I'm not leaving this room until you tell me if Jesus
is the Son of God, or if he's just this guy that we should be treating as a mighty teacher and prophet, and that's all. And so I sat there, and to the amazement of all YouTubers, nothing happened. You guys are probably expecting a sensational story, but absolutely nothing happened.
So no, God didn't come in through the window.
He didn't bust through the window. He didn't bust through the ceiling of the house.
He didn't say something that you heard him.
Yeah, I didn't hear him speak audibly. None of that jazz. When I got tired of waiting for that to happen, I went, all right, well, that was a waste. And I went, and I took this deep breath, and I just went, ah. And I just threw my head back up against the wall, closed my eyes. It was like, you know how like in Hollywood, whenever they show somebody like falling off of a cliff or something like that, and then you see like their whole life flashes before their eyes very quickly? That's the same thing that happened to me, except it wasn't my whole life. It was the past 6 months. And the only images that I was seeing were just short clips of every time that someone would tell me who Jesus was. A little clip of somebody telling me the gospel. A little clip of somebody telling me how Jesus did express his divinity in the Bible. All those little moments, they were condensed in chronological order.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from the beginning all the way up until that moment, till the conversation with homeboy over here, the Jamaican dude. All that, blah, 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 in order. And it was all super fast. And it was like, I don't know, 10 seconds. 6 months in 10 seconds. And when it was over, it was abrupt. Because the second that the last image hit, it was as if I had been underwater holding my breath. Because my eyes just threw themselves open and I went to catch a breath, because it was like I wasn't breathing. And I was like, what was that? That was intense. And then all of a sudden, I had this feeling like, you know the answer. And I'm feeling the anointing as we speak. I got all goosebumps in my body right now, because it was, you know what? A lot of us know the answer. And we just dance around the circle. Because we want to be super sure. But all we're doing is wasting time. Just like that first song, that first day that I went on a Wednesday to go and dig this guy's brain, and that song that they were playing that hooked me to continue to go, I surrendered. I walked out of that room, surrendered, and I said, okay, Jesus is who the Christians say that he is.
And I picked up my phone because I knew that there was somebody that was holding their breath, waiting for me to make that decision. And I had actually told him, don't hold your breath. I'm probably not going to become a Christian. And he was the first person I thought about because he was right and I was wrong. And so what ends up happening is that he says to me, have you done the sinner's prayer? And then I said, what's a sinner's prayer? And then he said, it's a prayer that you have to do in order to kind of like seal it in. You know, you have to, the Bible says to confess with your mouth in order to seal in your salvation or whatever. I said, okay, I mean, if it's gonna close the deal, then show me how. And he said, repeat after me. I repeated, and then I said, so is it done now? And then he was like, I'll see you in heaven. So we hang up, and I felt, and I didn't feel it after the sinner's prayer, I felt it immediately when I decided, when I realized coming out of that room that my question had been answered, and that Jesus is indeed who he says he was, and who everyone around me was saying he was. At that moment, when I accepted it, and I believed it, I instantly got a huge dose of inner peace. I didn't need a supernatural Kool-Aid experience. When I started this journey, I was looking for peace, inner peace. And upon making my decision, guess what God gave me? Exactly what I was looking for. The very reason why I went into this pursuit. He gave it to me. He gives us what we need. He gives us the desires of our heart as long as they're in alignment with where His heart is. I decided, I accepted, and He gave me peace. And it's never left me. And it never will. The peace that surpasses all understanding.
I was still not believing anything, but I wanted to encourage her in the decisions that she made. I wanted to be that parent that was there for her. As an artist, I was doing a painting, and she comes up to me and she says, do you know Jesus? And I said, that dude, yeah, I remember him. I was a teenager. I had gone on a trip out of the country, and it was such a beautiful area where I was at, and it was an artist village, and I remember saying, someday I'm going to live here. And I did. I lived there for a year. But when I said, someday I'm going to live here, a family member went in and said, no, you're not. This is way too expensive, and only artists live here. And I said, I know, but God told me that I'm going to live here. So I told her, yeah, I remember that dude. And she said, so what do you think about that? Are you willing to know him? And somewhere in the conversation, which is a little fuzzy for me right now, I must have said, yeah. I continued painting, and she walks off and came back with a cell phone. And when she gave me the cell phone, I didn't understand who it was. He said to me, this is such wonderful news. This is the best decision you've ever made all your life. And I was like, yeah, to myself, yeah, whatever. And he says to me, are you ready to give your life to Jesus? And my brain was like, heck no, I'm not giving my life to no dude. And he's like waiting for me. For the thing is, all this felt like, when I say it, it sounds like it took a long time, but it was a millisecond. My thought was, no, I'm not giving my life to this guy. And then I said, you know what? If Jesus wants my crappy life, He can have it. And I said to the guy, yes, I'll give my life to Jesus. And he recited the sinner's prayer, which I repeated. So I went on with my life. So I thought. I really did not go on with my life the way I knew it. As a matter of fact, I realized a few, like maybe 2 or 3 days later, I realized, wait a minute, I'm not speaking the way I used to speak, which I had a sailor's vocabulary. And the way I dressed changed. And the way I saw people changed. To the point that I was always happy and I was the clown and I was always the festive one. Loved cracking jokes. Always wanted to be a comedian. But when the doors closed at night, I was very unhappy. I was depressed and I had suicidal ideation. I wanted to die. I would pray that I would wake up in the morning and not be there, that I should be dead, that my kids were better without me, that I was a very poor parent. And when I say poor, in every sense of the word. So I was waking up happy, I was going to bed happy, and I was going through life happy. And that's when I realized that something changed in me. I was a new creation, a new person. The painting that I was making turned into something completely different. Everything in my life changed. Everything was accelerated. I was from a miserable, unhappy person without knowing where I was going to go and how I was going to do anything, to depending on God and going on a track, on a road, on a path that everywhere I went, I was experiencing something new. I was learning something new, and I was having supernatural experiences. Life became amazing. I was living in counterfeit and everything that was false, and now I know the truth. And I can tell you this, I am grateful every day that I am a believer, that I am a child of God, that He had patience to wait for me. Patience, because I came to the Lord when I was 48 years old. For 48 years, He was waiting for me to wake up and smell a coffee. But I can tell you this, everything I experienced, everything I did wrong, all of my mess has become a message. All of my mess. But I cannot look at a person wrong because I was wrong first. Because I was wrong for 48 years. And God had so much patience because for years He was knocking on my door, and for years I refused to open it. Until I finally decided to give my life to Jesus because I couldn't stand my life anymore.